My dad shoved my 9-year-old daughter at the Christmas table and said that seat was for his real grandkid and that she should get out. She fell to the floor in front of the entire family, yet no one said a word. I didn't cry. Instead, I spoke 4 words. My mom dropped her wine glass, and my dad's face turned pale. The sound of my daughter's knee striking the floor wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the way the entire room fell silent. Not the usual quiet that happens when someone says, let's say grace, and everyone pretends they aren't already chewing. This was a heavy kind of silence, the sort that settles over a room like a thick blanket, like a judgment already passed. My name is Leah. I'm a single mom, which means I've mastered 2 particular skills: pretending everything is fine and carrying far more than I should in one trip. For years, I believe I could manage my family as long as I kept myself small enough, smiling enough, apologizing enough, acting like I didn't take up too much space. Christmas Eve at my parents' house was always a yearly reminder that staying small still feels like too much space when someone has already decided you don't belong. The dining room looked like a holiday catalog had gotten into a fistfight with Nutcracker. Garland hung from everything. Candles filled the air with a scent of winter pine, which is really just a polite way of describing tree sap and a few lies. My sister Chelsea had insisted that we all wear matching sweaters. Naturally, hers looked adorable. Mine looked like I'd lost some unfortunate bet. My daughter, Maisie, kept pulling the sleeves over her hands. She was 9, and the sweater had been made for what Chelsea described as a petite angel. Translation, not my kid. At the head of the table, my dad ruled the room like he always did, holding his fork like a royal scepter. His laugh was loud, proud, and a little too satisfied with itself. Chelsea's daughter, Poppy, sat in the chair closest to him, the seat everyone treated like sacred ground. It was a chair that always got the best portion and the earliest refill. Somehow, that chair symbolized family more than the rest of us ever did. Poppy was 5 years old, with blonde curls, wide eyes, and a remarkable ability to get whatever she wanted with a single dramatic sigh. Everyone called her Grandpa's girl, as if that title were some kind of competition you could win. Maisie watched everything carefully, wearing the thoughtful expression of a child who had learned to read a room before she had finished learning to read books. It makes you proud of them, and at the same time it breaks your heart. Dad had been in what you might generously call a festive mood. When I arrived, he made one of his usual remarks. "Well, look who made it," he said, as if I had wandered into a party I wasn't invited to. I smiled anyway, because that's what you do when you've been trained for it. Smile, keep things easy. Don't give him a reason. Later, during dinner, the jokes began. "Blood's thicker than eggnog," he said, raising his glass toward Chelsea as though they shared some private punchline. Chelsea laughed louder than necessary. Mom laughed softly, almost like she hoped no one would hear her. Aunt Linda chuckled the way someone might if they were being paid for it. Maisie didn't laugh at all. She simply kept her hands folded in her lap, like a child who had already learned that laughter can sometimes be used against you. I noticed it, swallowed my feelings, and kept my focus on my daughter. And then, because my family loves the traditions, we reached the part where everyone pretends everything is normal. Maisie stood up holding her small paper place card. Chelsea had decorated them with glitter and little designs. Maisie walked toward the table with a small, hopeful smile. She wasn't trying to take anyone's crown or steal anyone's spotlight. She just wanted to sit down. She wanted to feel included the way children naturally do before the world teaches them that belonging is something you have to earn. She approached the special seat, not because she had chosen it, but because Chelsea had placed her card there. In a strange, dark way, it was almost funny, like the universe had a twisted sense of timing. Dad noticed the card. Then he saw Maisie's hand reaching for the chair. Something in his expression snapped. "That seat is for my real grandkid," he barked. Maisie froze. The hopeful smile vanished from her face. So quickly it felt like someone had cut a string. "Get out," Dad added, as though my 9-year-old daughter had attempted to rob him. Then he shoved her. It wasn't a light nudge or a gentle move along. It was a real shove, a grown man's hand pushing a child's shoulder, as if she were an inconvenience to be removed. Maisie stumbled. Her foot caught on the rug. Her knee struck the hardwood floor with a sound that made my stomach twist. Then everything went silent. Forks hung in the air. Someone dropped a napkin. Aunt Linda let out a small "oh," the kind of sound someone might make if a drink had been spilled, not if a child had been pushed to the ground. Chelsea didn't move. She simply stared, like she was watching a scene in a television show she hadn't planned to see, but might still find interesting. Mom's face went completely blank, practiced and controlled, as if she had prepared her entire life for this exact moment. My daughter looked up at me. She wasn't crying yet. She only looked confused, like her mind couldn't make the numbers add up. Before I realized it, I was already moving. I helped her stand. Her body was stiff, trembling with shock. Her knee was turning red. Her breathing came in short, uneven bursts. Her fingers grabbed onto my sleeve as though she needed something solid to hold on to. I looked around the table. There were more than 20 people there, adults, relatives, witnesses. Not one person stood up. Not one person asked my father what the hell he thought he was doing. Not one person reached out to help my daughter. Not even my mother. My ears began to ring. My vision narrowed. And in the middle of that ringing silence, a single thought settled into my mind with cold, perfect clarity. This ends now. I leaned close to Maisie and quietly whispered, "I've got you," because she deserved to hear at least one adult in that room speak the truth. Then I reached down with my free hand and picked up my bag. I didn't give a speech. I didn't ask permission. I didn't wait for anyone to suddenly grow a backbone. Instead, I took out a folder and placed it on the table in front of my parents, right between the cranberry sauce and the lie they had been feeding me my entire life. I looked directly at my father, then at my mother, and I said 4 words. "You've been served." For a moment, no one moved, not even my father. Then his hand slowly reached for the folder, as if it already belonged to him, the same way everything else in that house always had. He opened it and began scanning the first page. My mother still held her wine glass, frozen midway between the table and her lips, as though time itself might pause if she simply refused to blink. Suddenly, the color drained from my father's face. At the same time, my mother's glass slipped from her fingers and struck the table with sharp, unpleasant clink before tipping over. My father didn't look pale with anger, not the "how dare you" kind of pale. This was different. It was the pale of recognition, the pale of fear. Then I left the room with my daughter. Behind me, for the first time that entire evening, the silence finally shattered. But it wasn't broken by comfort. It was broken by panic. To understand why that folder was sitting inside my bag, you have to know what life in that house had always been like for me. People love asking questions such as, "Why didn't you just cut them off?" As if family were a simple light switch. As if you could flip it off and walk away without hearing their voices echoing in your head for the next 10 years. Growing up, my sister Chelsea was the sunshine. I was the stormy weather. Chelsea received praise. I received correction. Chelsea heard, "You're such a star." I heard, "Don't be so sensitive." Chelsea was told, "Come sit beside me." I was told, "Move, you're in the way." My dad had a favorite trick, saying cruel things while pretending they were jokes. As long as he smiled when he said them, it was supposed to make them harmless. When I was a teenager, he would grin and say, "Where did you get that hair?" Must have been the mailman. Everyone laughed. The nervous kind of laughter people use when they're terrified they might be the next target. Mom would give me that warning look that meant, "Don't start. Don't make this worse. Don't ruin dinner." Chelsea eventually became the proof my father wanted. Proof that his marriage was perfect. Proof that no one had ever deceived him. Proof that he was the type of man who could produce a real daughter. And me? I became the question mark. My father never took a test. That would have required admitting he might be wrong. It was much easier to punish me for his suspicion and disguise it as righteousness. And my mother allowed it. That's the part people never understand until they've lived through it themselves. A father might be cruel simply because cruelty is in him. But a mother has to choose, again and again, to stand there and watch it happen. My grandfather, my dad's father, was the only person on that side of the family who ever made me feel like I belonged. He wasn't exactly warm. He was one of those old-school men who believed emotions were for people who didn't have real work to do. Still, he would pat my shoulder and say, "You're smart. Don't let anyone dull that." On my birthday, he would quietly slip me a card with a crisp bill tucked inside. At the same time, he would loudly tell Chelsea to stop spending money as if it were a hobby. When he died, the atmosphere in the house shifted, but not because of grief. It shifted because of ownership. Dad suddenly controlled everything. The paperwork, the accounts, the decisions. I was told, very casually, that nothing had been left for me. That was a phrase my mom used, the same way someone might talk about leftovers. "There wasn't anything set aside," she said, staring at the kitchen counter. Her voice sounded flat, almost rehearsed, as if she were reading lines from a script. I tried to believe her, because the alternative meant accepting something much worse, that my parents would look straight at me and decide I didn't even deserve honesty. Then, 2 weeks before Christmas, I was babysitting Poppy, the golden grandchild, the one who gets the special seat, the first cookie, the fancy plate. Chelsea had texted me, "Can you watch Poppy for an hour? I have a work call." A work call? Sure. Chelsea works from home in the same way I do yoga, when I stretch across the couch to grab the remote. Still, I said yes. Poppy is 5 years old, and she likes me the way kids like adults who don't make them compete for affection. And maybe I also said yes because I'm still infected with that old family disease. Maybe if I'm useful, they'll treat me better. Chelsea left, and the house fell quiet. Poppy played with her dolls while I cleaned up wrapping paper, because apparently my role in that family is helper, not person. Chelsea's laptop sat closed on the coffee table, sleeping peacefully. Not my business. But Poppy noticed it immediately, the way children notice shiny, forbidden things. She flipped it open like she had done it 100 times before. The screen lit up, a password box appeared, and Poppy, tiny fingers, serious expression, typed the password as easily as if she were writing her own name, like it was part of the game. I froze. Kids don't know passwords unless someone teaches them. I walked over gently and said, "Hey, sweet pea, that's not a toy." I reached out to close the laptop, and that's when the computer fully woke up. A PDF reopened on the screen, as if the laptop had been holding its breath. At the very top, in bold letters, was my grandfather's name. I stopped breathing. I sat down, not because I was trying to snoop, but because my body recognized something before my mind did. This matters. I started reading quickly but carefully, the way people read when they're afraid of what they might discover, yet even more afraid of what they already suspect. There were official headings: trust, beneficiaries. My throat tightened, then I saw it. My full legal name, not a nickname, not something vague, not Leah, maybe, not other child. My name, printed clearly, cleanly, undeniably. I scrolled again, cautiously, as if moving too fast might somehow make the truth disappear. A page titled Distribution Summary was partly visible. One line immediately caught my attention, because the date was burned into my memory. It was the same month I had asked for help with deposit on a safer apartment after a break-in. The same month my father had laughed and said, "You should have made better choices." That same month, Mom simply shrugged and said, "We can't." Yet during that very same month, Chelsea suddenly announced how blessed she felt and drove home in a brand new SUV. I kept staring at that single line on the screen until the numbers began to blur together. Then I did the only clever thing I have ever learned to do in that family. I took a picture, just one clear photo, showing the trust, my name, and the part that actually mattered. After that, I shut the laptop. Poppy asked if she could watch cartoons. I smiled at her as if my entire world hadn't just tilted sideways. "Yes, honey," I said softly. "Pick whichever one you like." That evening, when Chelsea came home and chirped, "Everything okay?" I answered, "Yes." Not because everything was fine, but because I needed time. Confronting people like my parents without preparation is like stepping into a hurricane while holding nothing but an umbrella. 2 days later, I found myself sitting across from a woman named Rebecca Shaw in a small law office that smelled faintly of coffee and quiet competence. I slid my phone across her desk. Rebecca examined the photo for no more than 5 seconds before her expression shifted. It wasn't shock. It wasn't confusion. It was recognition. The kind of look someone gives when they have seen this exact pattern many times before. If your name is on the trust, she said calmly, the trustees don't get to decide that you suddenly don't count. I swallowed. Even if they believe, even if they think. Rebecca interrupted gently. Ink outweighs opinions. I never called my parents. I didn't confront Chelsea or try to clear the air. Instead, I let Rebecca handle everything quietly. When she finally handed me a folder several days later, I didn't rip it open in the parking lot like some dramatic movie scene. I simply sat in my car, staring at it as though it were a bomb. In a way, it was just not the explosive type. It was the kind that changes lives. For several days, that folder stayed in my bag. I would pull it out, then slide it back in, over and over again. I told myself I would deal with it after the holidays, not during Christmas, not in front of everyone. Don't be dramatic. Don't ruin things. I convinced myself I could endure just one more dinner. I told myself I could keep the peace a little longer, and then my father laid his hands on my child. At that moment, waiting stopped being an option. Maisie sat quietly in the car, not her usual quiet, the kind where she's secretly plotting how to convince me that dessert counts as a legitimate food group. This was a different kind of silence. The frightening kind parents recognize instantly, the sound of a child's mind trying to make sense of something that should never have happened. Her knee had begun to swell. She sniffed hard, as if she was fighting back tears, as though crying would somehow make her a problem. I hated them for that, for teaching her that feeling hurt meant being inconvenient. Keeping my voice gentle, I said, "Hey, look at me. You didn't do anything wrong." She kept staring out the window. He doesn't like me. My throat tightened painfully. That's about him, sweetheart, not about you. Maisie's voice grew even smaller. Is it because I'm not real? There it was, the poison passed down through generations like some twisted heirloom. I pulled the car to the side of the road for a moment because I needed my hands to stop shaking. "No," I said firmly, turn the word into a wall. "You are real, and you belong with me, always." She nodded slowly, like someone who wanted to believe but wasn't sure belief was free. The rest of the drive home passed with my jaw clenched so tightly my teeth hurt. Now, I know many of you are already wondering what exactly was inside that folder. Here it is. The truth I didn't explain at the table. My family didn't deserve a speech. That folder wasn't a threat. It was legal service. Inside was a court petition demanding a full accounting of my grandfather's trust. Every dollar that went in, every dollar that went out, every signature, every transfer. The petition asked the court to freeze all further distributions until the truth was documented clearly on paper. It also requested that my parents be removed from control of the trust, because what I had discovered wasn't a misunderstanding. It was diversion. The documents included exhibits. My name listed on the trust, distribution records matching the sudden miracles in Chelsea's life, and information about the trust administrator, so no one could claim the documents were fake. And then there was the cover page. That was the moment my father turned pale, because he recognized it, because he knew exactly what he had been doing, because he realized I wasn't guessing anymore. I was finished. My phone began ringing before I even pulled into my driveway. Chelsea called first, then Mom, then Dad, again and again. Chelsea's voicemail was half fury and half panic. "What did you do? Are you out of your mind? You're destroying everything." Mom's message came next, her voice trembling with tears. "Leah, please don't do this. Think about..." As if I hadn't already been thinking about my child's knee slamming against hardwood floors. Dad's voicemail was colder than the others. No shouting, no drama, just a flat statement. "You're not taking anything from this family." I didn't return a single call. Instead, I helped Maisie settle onto the couch in her leggings and an old hoodie. I pressed an ice pack gently against her knee and made hot cocoa with extra marshmallows, because sometimes parenting is simply knowing when a little sugar helps ease the pain. We watched a Christmas movie together. Maisie curled tightly against my side, as if she feared the world might shove her again the moment she moved. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing nonstop. The family group chat exploded. "Aunt Linda, How could you do this on Christmas? A cousin I barely spoke to messaged privately. I saw what happened. Are you okay? Chelsea began posting photos of Poppy sitting in the special seat, captioned like it was adorable, like everything was perfectly normal. Then the smear campaign began. Chelsea wrote on Facebook, "Some people will destroy a family for money." No names mentioned, just enough for everyone to connect the dots. People reacted with heart emojis, as if betrayal were some kind of inspirational story. My aunt messaged, "You've always been dramatic, Leah." My uncle added, "Call your father and apologize." Not one person asked the only question that mattered. Is Maisie okay? That silence told me everything I needed to know about the family I had spent years trying to protect. Then my father sent a single text, one meant to scare me into silence. A message he had clearly kept ready my entire life, waiting for the moment it would hurt the most. "You want to go to court? Fine. Tell the judge why you deserve my father's inheritance, if you're not even mine." My stomach twisted, not because I believe him, but because I understood exactly what he was trying to do. He wasn't defending the money. He was defending his supposed right to punish. And somehow, he was ready to drag my daughter into it as well. I stared at the message until my hands finally stopped trembling. Then I looked at Maisie, asleep on the couch, and whispered quietly, to her and to myself, "He doesn't get to write our story anymore." 2 days after Christmas, Rebecca Shaw forwarded me a PDF titled Response Plus Motion. There's nothing quite like opening your inbox and discovering a document that sounds like the sequel to a science fiction movie. Response 2, Motion Harder. I was standing in my kitchen wearing yesterday's sweatshirt, watching Maisie eat her cereal as if nothing in the world had happened. That's what children do when they're trying to be brave. She was 9. The crying had stopped, but in its place was that quiet withdrawal. When kids decide emotions are dangerous because the adults around them act like they are. My phone buzzed again. Rebecca texted, "Open it. Call me when you reach page 2. Page 2 was where they came straight for my throat. Not just the real grandchildren nonsense, though yes, that was there, bolded like a giant slogan on a billboard. They were also asking the court to dismiss my petition and sanction me for bad faith and harassment. Sanction, as if I were a misbehaving dog. I could almost hear my father narrating it. "See? Even the judge thinks you're dramatic." My stomach dropped so sharply that I had to brace myself against the counter. Rebecca called before I could process it. Her voice was calm in that particular way people sound when they've seen this exact movie before and already know how it ends. "They're going to try to make this about whether you're a real family," she said. "Don't take the bait." My throat tightened. They're really doing this." "They're desperate," she replied. "And desperate people throw sand." I swallowed. "If he says I'm not his, should we do a test?" There was a pause, just long enough for shame to begin creeping up my neck. Then Rebecca answered, "Not for the court, not for them. Your name is on the trust. Trustees don't get to rewrite that because of suspicion." I looked over at Maisie, who was carefully lining up her spoon and bowl, as if she could make the morning behave simply by making the objects behave. "I don't even know if I want the truth," I said quietly. Rebecca asked me to come into her office that afternoon. She slid a printed sheet toward me. "Initial snapshot from the trust administrator," she explained. I read the first line, and heat rushed to my ears. "Trust principal at grandfather's death, for $180,000. The next line made me blink. "Intended split, 50% Leah, 50% Chelsea." I leaned back hard in the chair. My voice cracked, so I cleared my throat. "So $240,000. Rebecca nodded once, then tapped the last line on the page. "Current trust balance, $38,000. For a full second, my brain refused to process it, like it was waiting for someone to laugh and say, "Just kidding." "That can't be right," I whispered. Rebecca didn't flinch. "It's right. Now we show the court how it happened." She pushed another page across the desk, titled Distributions. Trustee approved. It wasn't the entire file, just the highlights. Enough to make me sick, but not yet enough to fully prove it on paper. And that's when I saw where my life had gone. Not in some poetic sense, but in a line-item sense. We didn't go through every single transaction. No one needs a 90-minute documentary about my parents' creativity with other people's money. Rebecca pointed out the big entries, the kind that tell their own story even if you know nothing about finance. Chelsea's down payment, a vehicle purchase, medical, education. The categories were almost insulting. Label theft as family support, and suddenly it sounds wholesome. They told me they couldn't help me. I said, hearing my own voice felt strange, like listening to a recording, too calm, too controlled, as though letting the emotions out would drown me. Rebecca didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't say that's awful. She didn't perform sympathy. Instead, she handed me the truth like a weapon. They took money meant for you, she said, and treated it like a family slush fund. I stared down at the trust paperwork, at my name highlighted in neat black ink. It looked so official, so permanent, like it had always been real. That's when my phone buzzed again. A text from Aunt Linda. Why are you doing this to your father? I stared at the message and actually laughed. A single, sharp sound. Because, of course, Linda. I'm the one doing this, not the people who shifted hundreds of thousands of dollars around like loose pocket change. Later that week, while I was brushing Maisie's hair, she asked a quiet question. Do I have to say sorry? The words hit me like a punch. Sorry for what? She stared at her reflection in the mirror, avoiding her own eyes. 'Cause they're mad. I set the brush down. No, I said firmly, making the words solid enough to stand on. You don't apologize for someone else hurting you. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, like she'd been carrying that thought around in her backpack all day. That night, I made a decision I should have made years earlier. No visits, no calls, no surprise drop-bys. Boundaries so solid you could trip over them. They stole my money. They don't get my daughter, too. The first court hearing happened quickly, an emergency preservation order, a freeze, the kind of appearance where you don't wear something cute. You wear something that says, I am here to be taken seriously, and yes, I own an iron. Janine Keller, my parents' attorney, walked in like she owned the entire building. Miss Keller looked polished and bright-eyed, smiling with her teeth but not with her soul. She argued about real grandchildren. She argued about intent. She argued about family understanding. Rebecca requested 2 actions, the preservation of records and the freezing of financial movement. The judge approved both measures and established a deadline for complete file, every statement, every transfer record, and the trustee approvals connected to them. My father's jaw tightened instantly. Chelsea's eyes darted toward him, while my mother simply stared down at the table. As we walked out, my father finally looked at me as if he were trying to decide whether I was his daughter or his enemy. In my mind, I thought dryly, strange time to start questioning the relationship, Dad. When I returned home, Maisie was quiet. Not the, I'm fine kind of quiet. The other kind, the kind where a child is silently trying to understand what the world just showed her. While I was making dinner, she spoke softly and asked, Are we in trouble? I swallowed my anger like a heavy stone and replied gently, No, baby, we're safe. Between court hearings, the real evidence began to arrive. It didn't come all at once. Paperwork arrives the same way consequences do, slowly, steadily, and without mercy. About a week later, Rebecca sent me a short message. Come in now. I sat across from her again as she slid a single sheet across the desk as carefully as if it were a loaded weapon. Look at the approvals column, she said. I scanned down the page, signatures, initials, authorizations, until my eyes stopped. My mother's signature appeared there, not once, several times. My stomach sank. I barely heard Rebecca's next sentence. I was staring at the ink, at the familiar curve of my mother's handwriting, at how casually she had signed those approvals as though it were routine. I had believed it was only my father, but she had known. She had known the entire time. I didn't cry. Instead, I felt strangely steady. The next hearing felt like entering a room where everyone already knows the secret, and you are the only one pretending it isn't there. Ms. Keller attempted one last time to steer the argument back toward biology, but Rebecca didn't even blink. She kept it simple. My client's name is on the trust. Trustees have legal duties. Signatures demonstrate intent. And family rumors are not a legal defense. The judge didn't deliver a long speech. He delivered a decision. I won. My portion of the trust was $240,000. The court ordered my parents to repay it, along with interest, my legal fees, and additional penalties, bringing the total to $368,000. My father looked stunned. Chelsea went rigid. My mother didn't move at all. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt lighter. Not happy, simply lighter. Winning in court doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels more like your body finally releases something that has been clenching for years. Then you realize you're not entirely sure how to stand without that tension. When I got home, Maisie was sitting at the table doing homework, her tongue sticking out in concentration, like it was any ordinary Tuesday, as if a judge hadn't just placed a financial value on my parents' betrayal. I tried to cook dinner. I tried to pretend my hands weren't shaking. I tried to be the version of myself who believes that closure is real. Then I walked into my room and saw the box. It was small, plain, and unattractive. The paternity test kit, Ms. Keller's little gotcha. It had been mailed to me weeks earlier, like a challenge wrapped in cardboard. Rebecca had told me firmly, "Don't touch it, not for court and not for them. Don't let them drag you through the mud and call it truth." And I hadn't touched it. I had allowed paperwork to defeat rumor. I had let ink defeat cruelty. But now the case was finished, and the question still sat there like a live wire. I stared at the box long enough to hear my father's voice echo in my head. Real grandkid, real family, real, real, real. Then I thought about Maisie's neon hardwood floor shoes. I picked up the box, not because I owed anyone proof, but because I was tired carrying doubt as if it were my inheritance. Inside, everything was arranged neatly. Of course it was. My father didn't just want to be right. He wanted the presentation to match. His sample had already been included. That detail almost made me laugh. Not a happy laugh. The other kind, the one that escapes when someone's audacity becomes almost artistic. I didn't read the instructions. I didn't light a candle or make it ceremonial. I swabbed the sample, sealed it, and pushed it back into the mail like I was returning something that should never have been sent. Then came the waiting. You might think waiting would feel calm after court. It didn't. Every day I checked for updates like a compulsive habit. Every day I told myself it didn't matter. And every day, somehow, it mattered anyway. Maisie continued processing everything in her own quiet way. For the first few nights, she hovered near me as if bracing for the universe to shove us again. Then one evening, while I was tucking her into bed, she said casually, "I don't want to go there again." There was no tremble in her voice. No question, just a decision. Something inside my chest cracked open. Pride, grief, relief, they all stacked together at once. The email arrived on a Tuesday because life has a strange habit of dropping grenades into ordinary days. I opened it alone at the kitchen counter. I read it once, then twice, then 3 times, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something kinder. Biological match. I'm his daughter. My first feeling was a relief. It was fury. So clean it made me cold, because it meant the suspicion was wrong and the cruelty was still deliberate. It meant they could have ended this years ago with 1 test and 1 ounce of decency. They didn't want clarity. They wanted a license. So I sent the result to both of them. No long message, no explanation, no invitation to respond. Just, "You built my whole life around a lie. Here's the truth." Then I blocked them. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. A week later, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw my mother standing there alone, hands clasped like she was about to ask for forgiveness the way you ask for a favor. Maisie was at school. Thank God. I opened the door just enough to make it clear I was listening, not welcoming. My mother's eyes were swollen, not in a dramatic way, in a tired way, like she'd been crying at the mirror and losing. She didn't start with "I'm sorry." She started with strategy. "Your father, he's been different," she said. He asked about Maisie. I said nothing. "He wants to see her," she rushed on. "He wants to be a family now that we know. Now that we know." Like love is a subscription that activates when the lab confirms you qualify. Then she finally cracked, and the truth came out in the only way it ever comes out after years of silence. messy and too late. Before you were born, she said, voice shaking. I slept with someone else. Just once. Your father found out, or he suspected. Honestly, I don't even remember which came first anymore. But from that moment on, he decided you might not be his. And I let him treat you like a question mark, because I was guilty. I thought I deserved it. And somehow, you ended up paying for it instead. I thought I was doing what I had to do. She continued. And now we can fix it. We can... I waited until she finished. Then I said quietly, no. Her face tightened like she didn't understand the language. So I made it plain. It shouldn't have mattered. I told her, you were my mother whether I was his or not, and you chose him anyway. She tried to speak. I didn't let her. My father doesn't get Maisie now because a test says real. I said, you don't get to come back because the story is comfortable again. I told her the only thing she was leaving with was the knowledge that she'd been wrong. Then I closed the door. That night, Maisie asked me, steady and small, we're not going back, right? I sat beside her on the couch, close enough that she didn't have to be brave alone. No, I said, we're not. And this time, it wasn't a promise. It was a boundary. For months later, the money hit my account. All of it. They sold the house, the one they'd owned outright, the one my father used to call his legacy. Turns out legacy doesn't mean much when a judge orders restitution, interest, and fees. And there's nowhere else to pull from. The sale covered it. Every dollar that was taken, every dollar the court added on top. When the wire cleared, I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I paid off what I needed to set up Maisie's future and closed the door on the rest. They're broke now, not we need a budget broke, downsized, borrowed, quiet broke. The kind of broke where relatives stop calling and excuses stop working. Where no contact, not the dramatic kind, the peaceful kind. Maisie laughs more. She sleeps through the night. She doesn't ask about real anymore. She knows where she belongs. I don't flinch when my phone buzzes. I don't brace myself at holidays. Our life is smaller and somehow so much bigger. They lost their money. They lost their story. They lost control. And I got my life back. So, what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.